All right. So I did start with a poll, and it was interesting that 50-50 do use the same password on multiple sites, which is a bad password practice. 1 out of 4 have reused passwords. 1 out of 4 does not know what 2FA or MFA is. That's short for two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. And then 3 out of 4 do not use a password manager. So that's not good. And then nobody knows how long that's just trivia, how long it takes to crack an 8-character password. You will know before this is over though. This is Your Password Sucks, part of Tech Tuesdays at New Haven County Bar Association. And I'm just curious before we jump into it, how far do you live from where you were born? If you could just put that in the chat, that would be great. A minute. I'll leave the poll up just in case anybody else jumps on. And I'm going to tell you a quick story. A friend of mine, he's not a client, he's just a friend. He owns a roofing business, and a client, he requires half up front when somebody hires him to do the roof. So a deposit of half, whatever the roof is going to cost. And he sent the contract and the information to a client recently. The client sent an email back asking if he accepts Venmo. He never replied to that message. I can tell you he doesn't, but he never replied to the message. And an hour later, got another email from the client saying, never mind, I'll pay a different way. Well, it turns out the second email wasn't actually the client. In the second email, if you look, when he got me involved, I looked, there was one difference in the email address, and that was they added the letter I somewhere in the middle of the email. So letter I, if you're scanning quickly, you might not notice it, especially if you don't expect anything is suspicious about the email. Well, it turns out some bad people had access to the homeowner's email address and were intercepting the conversation and having this conversation with my friend who's the roofer, and convinced the homeowner to send $3,500 to their Venmo. So she's out $3,500. She's disputing with Venmo. I don't know what the status of it is. I haven't heard an update, but could potentially be out $3,500, which is a lot of money for a lot of people, especially, you know, you're putting a new roof on your house and the finger pointing starts. And fortunately, you know, my friend knows me, so I was able to show them what went wrong. But you know, the finger pointing starts. Oh, this is your fault. This is your business. I'm out $3,500. I'm not, you know, you have to do something about this, or whatever it may be. And it's real easy. Now I didn't do full forensics on her email account. She didn't want me involved at that point because now she's in contact with Venmo. But I'd be willing to guess she has very weak security on her email account and very weak password. And so a homeowner who probably couldn't afford $3,500 is out $3,500 potentially now. 99% of all data breaches could have been prevented with better password policies. That is a statistic that keeps popping up over and over in the last few months. Most of the breaches have occurred through phishing, which goes back to poor password management, because now if you're getting phished, you don't have multi-factor authentication set up. Through having just weak passwords, having passwords that are reused, having passwords that show up on previous breaches, which means you haven't changed it or you're reusing it somewhere else. And so all of those things lead to potential account compromises. 99% of those breaches that occur are because a password was found. The SolarWinds compromise that I keep bringing up because it just fascinates me. But late last year, the attackers had an FTP, which you shouldn't be using FTP to begin with, but they had access to FTP to a management server for SolarWinds, and the password on that account was SolarWinds123. It's a weak password. It's guessable. The US CISA, this just came out a couple of weeks ago. The US CISA, which is federal agency, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, say that 5 times fast, says using a single factor method of authentication is bad practice. What is a single factor? If I'm logging into my bank and all I'm putting in is my username and password, that's single factor authentication. Currently, there are 15 billion, would it be, stolen passwords on the dark web, accessible to anybody. So if I go to the dark web, which is not hard to get to, not somewhere you want to be, by the way, but it's not hard to get to. There are 15 billion passwords listed. So as an example, you may remember back 5, 6 years ago, LinkedIn was hacked. And the hackers stole all of the usernames and passwords and some other information. So my password on LinkedIn at that time was stolen. Those passwords are on the dark web for just anybody to use. See, what makes it more interesting is, or more dangerous, I suppose, is there are password lists that I can go and download right now, download it to a computer running a certain version of Linux, open up a program, a script that runs, checks all those passwords against usernames, against whatever website I want to check it on. And it only takes a few minutes to do. This leads to account takeovers, identity theft, financial loss, business email compromise, and reputation loss. As an example, I don't know, sometime earlier this year, Amazon Rings, there were articles about how the Ring cameras were being hacked. Well, the Ring cameras were not being hacked. The reason people were able to get into the Ring cameras is because the owners of the Ring cameras were using the same passwords that were already out on the internet somewhere. So they would use the same email address and the same password to log into that person's Ring account. They ran a script, they checked it against a bunch of Ring accounts, and they were able to get into some of those Ring accounts. And now they're spying on people's families. And I think there was one case where they were talking to a baby or something like that. Very, kind of creepy stuff, but it was really the end user, the homeowners or the business owners at that point who were using weak credentials. They were using passwords that were already leaked in previous breaches.
Scott, just briefly, this brings up, an important point, and I apologize for interrupting.
Yeah, no problem.
This password, all these password lessons that you're talking about here, they really apply not just to attorneys' business accounts. So much, stuff nowadays is out there that these practices should be applied to, people's personal accounts just as much, even though there's not necessarily the penalty involved of, what happens when clients' information is turned over, which is obviously terrible. If there's some sort of breach, or if you lose valuable, work resources, et cetera. But there's no excuse for not, applying all these lessons to your personal emails. Your personal accounts as well.
Right, and that's actually a great point, because that also leads to account or to impersonation attacks. So let's say Chris, I don't know if Chris has a Facebook or not, but let's say Chris has a Facebook.
He does not.
Then I can't do it, darn it. Then I get into Chris's Facebook account and change the password, so I lock him out. And this actually happened to a friend of mine too, who's a photographer, but similar scenario. I lock him out of his Facebook account, and now I have control of his Facebook account. I'm going to now start messaging all of Chris's friends and say, hey, I need help with this, or hey, can you help me? I'm going to try to trick them into either giving me money or giving me information or giving me access. Any of those things can happen. It can happen on LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever account, Twitter, whatever you might use as social media for personal or business purposes. It happened in the first example I gave with the homeowner's personal email account. It wasn't a business account. It was her personal email account. So yes, it could lead to impersonation attacks. And then, Chris takes a big reputation hit because somebody pretending to be him is doing, really nefarious things to other people, and they think it's Chris. So good point. And that would lead to a reputation loss, obviously, as well. So I mentioned how long does it take to crack an 8-character password? And so here it is. It takes 5 hours for an 8-character password. It takes less than a second for a 7-character password. The most common password, and I'll show you that slide next, but people are still using passwords that have been deemed unsafe a long time ago. So in my next shot, you'll see that the number one leaked remote desktop protocol password, which is a Microsoft software to allow you to remotely log into another computer, is 123456. And it's just, and that is on the list of commonly hacked passwords as late as 2019 as well. I don't think it's number one, but it's up there. But any 8-character password, it doesn't matter how you set up that password, will take 5 hours to crack with today's computing power. You add one more character, it takes significantly more. Another, you see up to 12 characters, 200 years. I don't use anything less than 16 characters myself.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Yep.
As well? I'm sorry.
No, I like it this way better anyway.
So for anybody who's watching, listening, who does not know what cracking a password is, Scott was mentioning, some common passwords that, some nefarious user, might easily guess. A crack is something different where a computer, is set up to just try and, they brute force is often what they call it, just throw tons of combinations of passwords, at a system, whether it's your email or whatever. And so what Scott's graph here shows is that how long it would take a computer to try every possible combination of, characters, every possible password, and, it could try every conceivable 7-character password in, longer or in shorter than you could, say it. And, obviously the time it takes increases exponentially, as Scott's, graph shows, based on how many different combinations there are. Every character you add, there's so many more combinations. But another important part of this is, as Scott was alluding to, this is current technology. If you went back 10 years, it took a computer a lot longer to crack a 7-character password. People hang on to their passwords sometimes for a long time. And this, is important because if your, data is stolen or something like that, we may be talking about a situation where people are not trying to crack your, 10-character password, right now. They might be trying to do it, 2 years from now or anything like that. So, having the longest reasonable password that you can, and we'll get into password managers a little bit, is very important, not just now, but going forward.
Exactly. So as an example, I have successfully on many occasions, I'll get a computer where the end user forgot the password and insert a USB drive, load up some software and crack the password within a matter of minutes. Now, today, that's a little bit more difficult with Windows and Apple computers for that matter, because now some people are using their cloud accounts. So the password is not stored locally anymore. But as another example, and one of the suggestions we're going to make is that you encrypt your devices. I have client's computer now, their laptop, where the motherboard went. I pulled their hard drive out, connected it to, we call it a sleigh, we plug it in, and I'm able to pull all of the data. Now, in this case, that's what he wants. He wants all the data off of his old hard drive. But if you're not encrypting your data, then anybody can do that. So there's another example of why passwords, and in this case, encryption, are important. And what Chris alluded to was based on today's compute power. This is going to change. So quantum computing is coming. And as a matter of fact, Google already has the capability. Supposedly China already has the capability. And what that means is these times will be dramatically lower once quantum computing power is in the hands of the people that would do these things. It's also going to change because, as we talked before this presentation started, Microsoft is moving away from passwords, and we're starting to see some other applications that are also moving away from passwords. So now, instead of you logging in with the same password into, especially now with Microsoft, you can use Office 365 in multiple locations. I have clients that are just set up with Windows Virtual Desktop, Windows 365 is called now. You know, if you log into one computer, you log into multiple computers with your Office 365 account. So those passwords are no longer locally stored. They're stored on Microsoft servers. But instead of putting in a one-time password that maybe you haven't changed in 2 years, they're going to send you a one-time password that's only good for, in a lot of cases, 30 seconds. And you use that, and then it's no longer good. So this is going to change. It's going to take some time for a lot of places to adopt that as well, though. These are the top 10 used passwords for remote desktop protocol. And again, we saw a huge uptick in remote desktop protocol when the pandemic started. So it's been 1.5 years now. And I saw some people go home and use similar passwords to this. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 71,639 accounts were found to have that. So there's probably more, but 70, almost 72,000. 1, 2, 3, it's like, I could guess that. And I have guessed similar passwords. I used to work for a cable provider. They launched, this was going back probably about 10 years ago now. They launched a modem. So we all have modems now that have Wi-Fi. So the cable provider I worked for at the time was one of the first ones to do this. And they said, well, nobody will guess the management password for these modems. And I guessed it within 5 minutes because they used the branding for the company in the password. So if it was, you know, Scott's Cable Services, they used Scott in the password, which is a big mistake. You know, I saw this password with an @ instead of an A. They didn't use a 0, they used an O and then an uppercase P on a lawyer's account, an email, an Office 365 account. 1, 2, 3, 4, password 1 just blows my mind. The word password. And I think sometimes what happens too is an IT person will set up an account and say, okay, here's a temporary password. You need to change it when you log in. Now we can force those things now, but you know, a few years ago we couldn't. So they get the password, current password is password. They think to themselves, this is easy, this is great, I'll just leave it as that. And they never change it. Well, you don't know how long somebody's lurking in your account. And to another point Chris made, the attackers are patient and they will wait. They will wait to use your credit card numbers. They will wait to use your passwords. They will try to sell them repeatedly. You know, they might sell it to me and then I might turn around and sell it again. They will wait to use it. So if you have the same password for a while and that password is password, they could be in that account already and just waiting for the right opportunity to take advantage of it. This last password, I know it looks like it's a complicated password, but it turns out that is actually the default password to some type of hardware. I'm not sure what it is, where people can log in through remote desktop protocol. So it was every now and again, a few times a year, we find a breach or vulnerability where the hardware manufacturer has passwords hard-coded onto the device. Most recent one was, I think, SonicWall, or one of the firewall vendors had a management password hard-coded into the hardware. So once that password was discovered, now everybody has access to it. So best practices for password, and we can add to this list as we go, because as I'm going through this, I just thought of one that I mentioned a few minutes ago. But the first, and probably one of the more important pieces, as long as passwords are going to remain, is complex password. So a complex password means uppercase, lowercase numbers, special characters. The longer, the better. And making sure you're not reusing passwords. And by not reusing passwords, which is number 2 there, I mean, don't use a password you used 6 months ago. And also don't use a password on multiple platforms. Don't use the same password. So if I'm using a password for my bank account, I shouldn't be using that same password to log into Office 365 or to Facebook or to anything else.
Scott, can I jump in
Yep.
there? It's a tale of woe that I think drives that point home a little bit. Years ago, I, like, many people, would use the same password for everything, and just that it was, it was decent length, but it was something I could remember, and my brain was seemingly full with other things all the time. So just having the one password made a lot of sense. And what I never took into account with my password security is that your password, no matter how long, no matter how complex it might be, is only as good as the weakest place where you put it. And what do I mean by that? I don't mean writing it down on a slip of paper that you leave in your office drawer, which also not a good idea. But what I meant is I was using it on all types of websites, and it was my personal, not my work email address. And it never occurred to me that I had to worry about the security practices of the websites that I had accounts with. And it was years ago. Since now it's pretty common to be see the news about these websites getting hacked, but that's what happened. Is the website, one of the websites I had an account with was a popular website. They got hacked, and they were storing all the users' passwords in a way that allowed the attacker to see them in plain text. A deficient practice, certainly, but something that I had no idea about and had no way to control. And so what happened is, my email address and my password for literally everything was then, published, on the internet. It wasn't even on the dark web. I mean, I'm sure it was, but it was literally published, on normal public-facing internet. And so, as soon as the attack was announced, I went and I changed everything. But, like anybody nowadays, you probably have, a ton of online accounts. There's no shortage of things you have to sign into nowadays, and that's only increasing. So if you use the same password for everything, and one of those websites gets attacked and does not have sufficient security practices in place, then you've got a problem, because it's not a matter of somebody saying, oh, this looks like Chris Nelson's password, let me try it on all these websites. People have access to automated tools, and they can just take usernames and these, passwords, and just throw them against a bunch of, major websites, financial institutions, etc. And if it hits, you're sunk. So it's incredibly, incredibly important to have different passwords for every, website, every account that you have. That is tremendously challenging, challenging. And I think for all of the practices Scott, laid out here, you get to this, point, and I think this is probably the #1 challenge with passwords, is that you say, geez, I just can't remember all these things. What good is it to me if I can't log into these accounts? And that's going to take us, I think, to one of the next tips that Scott's going to talk about, the password manager. But under no circumstances should you be using the same password for more than one account.
Yeah, so we are gonna talk about password managers. I'm also gonna show you what it looks like where you can check your own if your accounts have been involved in a breach and what you need to do for free. There's multiple free resources, but I'll show you one that's pretty common. So not reusing passwords, monitoring for breaches, which I'll show you in a minute how you could check to see if your email accounts. Now, if you're like me, you'll have multiple email accounts, so you'll have to check each one individually. There is a free tool. It's called Spybot. What's it called? Spybot something. Spybot Identity Monitor. You can put, if you have, let's say, 5 email accounts, you put the email accounts in there, and they'll check it. You'll have to, either leave it open, which I wouldn't recommend, or check it periodically. Use multi-factor authentication, and wherever possible, use biometrics. And biometrics, while I know there's been incidents where they've been tricked, they're definitely not as easy to trick as just a password or just a one-time password. If you're going to use one-time passwords, avoid text messaging if you can, and use an app. So Microsoft has an app, Google has an app. There's another one called Authy, or you could use hardware tokens, but you'll have to buy one for every password you have, and that gets expensive. The reason you don't want to use passwords through SMS or text message is because there is another issue out there in the world called SIM swapping, and T-Mobile just got hacked again, and I think AT&T may have gotten hacked, or somebody else got hacked. So it is possible that somebody could now take your phone number and use it on another phone and then have access to those text messages, among other things. So the apps are better for that reason.
And not every account, allows for an app. Again, the password managers, can be set up now through more and more things to work with two-factor, but Scott's absolutely right. The text messaging is not secure, but it's better than having just the one-factor authentication.
Exactly. So it's better than nothing, but if you have an option, then don't use that option. And actually, in my opinion, I think the apps are easier to use anyway, rather than text, because then you got to wait for the text message, and sometimes it gets hung up. Biometrics means, retina scan, facial recognition, thumbprint scanner. A lot of computers are now coming with one or more of those. Windows 10 allows you to do facial recognition, which is better. I have not had an incident where I was able to get into a Windows computer with facial recognition with somebody else's face. My kids are able to bypass some Android phones using my face. So my son has gotten into my Android phones before. I don't have Android anymore, but when I did, he was able to get into my Android phone that had my face set up using his face. My kids are like mini unprofessional hackers. They amateur hackers. They try all the time. But biometrics definitely better. There are some, depending on how much security, you'll find some businesses, usually enterprise type businesses, will set up partial geolocation. So if you're not where you're supposed to be, you're not going to be able to log in. Use a password manager. So Chris alluded to that a little bit. I use Lastpass. There are certainly a bunch of other ones out there that you can use. The Lastpass is a website and an application, as are a bunch of others. So the concern with that is what happens if they get hacked. And I believe Lastpass was hacked once before, many years ago. Of course, it's a legitimate concern, and I understand that. You can use a software-based password manager as well. The one that I'm familiar with is KeePass, and it's spelled K-E-E Pass. And so you download that to your computer, your phone, and you just use it from there. Not as easy to use because, at least with LastPass, once you generate a password and add it to whatever it is you're logging into, LastPass will automatically save it for you. And all you need to do is remember the one password for LastPass. OnePass is I think it's 1Password is another one. But there are a bunch of them out there. So do your research, figure out which one works best for you. I don't know if Chris has a different one, but.
So those are, I think, are the two big ones. If you are, wholly in the Apple ecosystem, they have their own, baked in one through iCloud. But they've now, in fact, started allowing, other people to integrate with that password management in, iPhones and stuff. And actually, Microsoft's Authenticator, I believe now is also working as a password manager in addition to its two-factor authentication services. There, Lastpass and things like that you'll pay for. It's certainly worth it, but there are free alternatives. The Microsoft Authenticator, I think works everywhere. And as I said, if you're in the Apple ecosystem, just the iCloud password management, is absolutely sufficient. It generates long, complex passwords and fills them in on websites, so you do not have to remember them.
Yeah, and with those applications, so if I use LastPass as the example, and if you are a business owner or you're running a business and you have multiple employees, you get the LastPass. I don't know what they call it, but there is a version of LastPass where your employees also save their passwords to it. So this way, all your employees are following best practices, and that's encouraged as well. Whatever is going to make it easier for your employees to not cough up their password when the time comes is beneficial to your business for sure. Stop oversharing. So what do I mean? If you're on Facebook, Chris isn't, but if you're on Facebook, you've all seen, and I'm sure Chris has seen examples of this, where they'll do these quizzes and it's 20 questions like, what was your first concert? What was the name of your first pet? Or
how far away from your house is your
you're
office?
You're ruining it. But questions like that. And why do they ask these questions? This is a form of social engineering. So they're asking these questions, and yes, I know they go viral, and nobody could possibly keep up with all the responses, but they're going to find a lot of them. And these questions are commonly used for password security. When you need to reset your password, these are used as security questions for a lot of different applications. And I partnered with someone once we all worked in IT at a company that was very focused on IT security, but they had a self-password reset, which, by the way, I would encourage you to also offer to your employees. But they had a password reset system where if you forgot your password, you had to answer some security questions. So the guy came in one day, and the other guy I partnered up with, we just throughout the day would ask him random questions. They were all the security questions. I think there was 3 of them, and he answered all of them. And so we locked his account on him. A lesson, was kind of a friendly lesson, I guess you could say. But the point is, he gave up that information because he didn't feel like anything was off. And that's the goal of social engineering, to make you feel comfortable and to get information out of you. It's a con. They're basically con artists, but there is, so there are also people that do it to teach you how to avoid it, but they're con artists. So they're trying to get information out of you, and that information will then be used for another purpose. It may be tomorrow, it may be a year from now. So stop oversharing on social media. I would also say, if you go on vacation, I know everybody wants to share their vacation photos. Wait till you get back. Wait till you get back, because now you're telling people, and I know this is an older one, but you're telling people you're not home. And the same thing with autoresponders. I have an email list that I send out periodically, usually 3 to 4 times a month. And I will get 4 or 5 vacation responders. I'm out of office until XYZ. Well, you're giving too much information out when you do that. And I know some email systems allow you to tell it who can get that automatic response. I would say don't do it at all, but if you need to let people know, so if I need to let people know I'm not going to be around, I will let the right people know, and that's it. Don't use personal info your passwords, we talked about this earlier, you know, don't use your children's birthdays or your birthdays, don't use your name, your company's name, or anything like that in your passwords, your pets' names, anything that can be found on the internet. And a lot of information is easily found on the internet. There are websites dedicated to finding information on the internet. And so the last point I have here is don't store your passwords in browsers. I know that Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge now do offer password management. And I think Google Chrome even tells you now if the password has been found on a data breach site somewhere. The problem with that is if somebody is on my computer, there are applications that they can install and run that will pull all of the passwords out of those browsers. And so now they have access to all of the passwords you saved in your browsers, along with credit card details. So if you're storing your credit cards in Chrome or Edge or any other browser, be aware of that. Remove them as soon as you can. If you're logged into something already and they gain access to your computer, they now have access to whatever it is you're logged into. We also talked about encryption earlier. If you encrypt your computers and your mobile devices, your phones, some people ask me, should I encrypt my desktop, my server? You know, my server weighs, I have a server here that I'm putting together, probably weighs 80 pounds. Nobody's going to walk away with that. Yes, they will. They will pick it up. They will walk right out the door if opportunity arises. If it's encrypted and you have a strong password, they're never going to get the data off of there. You're out of server.
Just on that, if somebody has, you know, just a modest amount of time, they don't need to take the whole,
right,
you know, 80-pound computer to get the information, obviously.
That's also true. They open it up and pull the hard drives out. And that's all they need because all the data is there. Again, that's why you encrypt it, because once the hard drive is pulled out of that computer, it's encrypted. It cannot be cracked using today's methods.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah. And this is, you know, most of the people who this is aimed at probably are not, you know, putting together servers, maintaining servers, or possibly even, you know, have servers for their office, but almost certainly have laptops. And if, you know, that you absolutely need to do some disk encryption. All the major operating systems, you know, have it that you can turn on, you know, easily. I think the one exception to that that people may run across is if you ran to, you know, maybe a Best Buy or something like that, and you got yourself a Windows 10 Home Edition, or you're still on, you know, Windows, you know, 8 Home Edition. You may have to pay to upgrade that so you can do full disk encryption. And absolutely, certainly, if it's a laptop, you absolutely need that, because God forbid you just, you know, not if it's not even just stolen, let's just say you lose it somewhere. You know, what happens, you know, under our rules of professional conduct, and you know, you realistically, you lose a laptop, even if you don't know if anybody, you know, got it. If it's not encrypted, you probably need to send out something to all your clients, if there's any client information out there, saying that you've had a data breach. If it's encrypted, that's probably not the case. Simply losing it, you know, does not grant access to anybody, to any of your client information. And so that's a big deal. If you become aware that, you know, somebody got in because you have a weak password or something like that, you know, it gets more complicated. But full disk encryption on, you know, any type of mobile computer is an absolute must.
100%, and your mobile phones too. I'm going to show you, before we go to the next slide, the website I was talking about, and it's have I been pawned, but there's no a.com. Hang on, let me switch here. So this is the website, and I put in my Gmail account. I've had this Gmail. I got a Gmail account as soon as they started Gmail. So I don't really use it for much other than signing up for things that I suspect are going to spam me. And so here I put in the email address and I clicked on Pond, and it tells me my email address has been involved in 16 data breaches and 1 paste, which is there's a file out there somewhere with a bunch of information on this email address. Now the password's been changed multiple times, so, and it has 2-factor authentication on it now. And so those are the 3 steps it tells you here. Protect yourself using 1 password. So obviously 1 password probably bought this website at some point, and allows you to generate passwords. And you could do that with pretty much any password manager. Enable 2-factor authentication and subscribe to notifications. I think they charge you for that, but I'm not sure. Maybe not. But then it shows me down here all the different breaches that my email address has been part of and what was compromised. So this Day, not even sure what that is, but they claim it's 23,000 different websites, and email address and passwords were included. The data was provided by HIBP. I'm trying to see here. Okay, so both password hashed and cracked. So what does that mean? So when most, not all, but most websites or applications will hash your passwords. So what they do is they take your password and they, sort of like encryption, they make it a bunch of random characters that are not readable. And then it's supposed to make it so that you can't crack it. However, they can be cracked. It takes a little longer. But what happens now is if somebody does crack it, figure out, and basically they're using software to figure out what it is, that now will show up as a cracked password. So instead, if I have password 123 and it's hash and it's just a bunch of random characters, somebody cracks it, now they know the hash for password 123 is whatever that hash is. And so now whenever that hash shows up, the password 123 is going to show up as the associated password. And then also plain text. So some of those web applications must have had the password stored as plain text, which is really bad. Here's a collection number 1. Not really sure what that is, but there's a bunch of usernames and passwords associated with it. Data enrichment exposure from PDL customer. I remember looking at this before, but these are some security researchers, Bob Dachenko, you may have heard his name before, but they found a bunch of, so this could have been something they found somebody storing it on Amazon web servers or something. And so it could have been a bunch of breaches that were listed together and stored on a server somewhere. Here's one from Dropbox, and I vaguely recall this back in 2012. They were hacked. Ebony is a game I used to play online. I don't anymore, but they were hacked in 2016. Not sure what this is. A huge list of email addresses and password pairs appeared in a combo list referred to. So it's a list. Somebody found a list, and it's being passed around on the internet. JE Fit back in August. I don't think I've even used this one, but there it is. August of 2020, so a year and a half ago, or a little more than a year ago. Mail.ru, I've definitely never used mail.ru, but just to give you an idea, my Gmail account shows up there. Something to do with Bitcoin. MyFitnessPal, I used to use that. I probably should start using it again. The good thing is that, by the way, when they get hacked, their security improves dramatically after that. Online spam bot, I don't know what that is. Park Mobile, this is a recent one. If you use an app, and more parking lots are starting to use it now, where you pay through the app to park in a parking lot and you just put in the parking lot number or your license plate number, that was hacked just a few months ago. So if you're using this, there's a good chance that your stuff, including your license plate number, shows up in the hack. Let's see if there's any other recognizable one. Verifications.io, I'm not sure. Zynga, I used to play Zynga on Facebook. Oh, actually, that's not true. I used to play chess with friends, I believe, and that is a Zynga game. So just to give you an idea, now if I put in my business account, it better not show up on any hacks, because pretty good. See, I feel better now. Let me go back to the slideshow. So that was Have I Been Pawned, PWNED. There are other ones out there, but that's the most popular one. And then Chris almost ruined it for me. How far away do you live from where you were born? So let's see who answered that question. It's just us, so it's okay. Where's the chat? So Cindy said 45 minutes. Mike said 30 minutes. Peter said 2 hours. It's real easy. See, Chris didn't answer. He's smart. It's real easy now.
Smart or just knew what was going on.
It's real easy based on this information. So I'm going to pick on Mike because I haven't picked on him in a while. If I look up Mike Ardrey on the internet right now, it will probably, if I do enough digging, I could probably figure out where he lives now. Now I know he lives within roughly a 20 to 30 mile radius of where he lives now is where he was born. I look for major hospitals in that area. What is one of the more common password security questions out there? Where were you born? So let's say he was born, let's say he lives, I don't know, I'm just throwing cities out there. Let's say he lives in, I don't know, somewhere north of Springfield, 20 minutes outside of Springfield, 30 minutes outside of Springfield. I can assume he was probably born in Springfield. And then look at all the major hospitals in Springfield if they really want to drill down. But then I can say, okay, I know he was born in Springfield. That's the answer to the security question. This question constantly comes up on social media all the time, and I see people answering it. Now, if you tell me, so I tried this as a test today on Twitter, and the first answer was 2,600 miles from where I am now. Well, I'm not going to be able to figure that out. But if you're saying 20, 30 minutes, you're putting your information out there. You might not think you are, but you are. And so that's enough information for somebody to potentially get more information about you. The same thing for social security numbers. I get phone calls sometimes where they'll say, you know, we need to talk to Scott Gumbar, but first we need to verify your last four of your social security number. Well, no, I'm not doing that, because that's all they need. If they have where I was born and roughly when I was born, they already have the rest of my social security number potentially. All they need is the last four. So that's the kind of information, if you're putting out there, you're putting your identity at risk, you're putting, you know, account resets at risk and so forth. Any questions? Or
I'm going to jump in
info?
here.
Go ahead.
Well, unless somebody else had one, but aside from using a password manager, do you have any other tips to help people come up with unique and complex passwords? Not everybody who's going to watch this is going to go sign up for a password manager, although you should start using them. But what can we do in the meantime?
Yeah, the other method that a lot of people use is song lyrics, movie quotes, things like that, and then, you know, subbing out the letter E for the number 3, adding some special characters, using some uppercase, lowercase, things like that. The problem with that, so that's a great plan. So if I said, you know, Now Use Can't Leave, one of my favorite movies is A Bronx Tale. Now Use Can't Leave, and then put, you know, change a few letters for numbers, put in a couple of special characters. The problem with that is you should still use a different password for every application and website that you use, and you're going to forget. You're going to forget what the password was.
Yeah, no question about that.
Right. So then that's where the password manager comes in to play again. Now, could you do that for your password manager? Absolutely. The other thing I will say is single sign-on is great if you can use it. So, you know, whether it's through Microsoft, which a lot of people do, or if you're doing it through Google or Facebook or whatever. The problem with that, the only drawback to that will be is if somebody figures out your Google password or your Microsoft password, whatever it is, because now they have access to everything that you're using single sign-on for.
Well, you know, and I think that's largely true with the password manager too, but having one difficult password that you have to remember is still, I think, a lot safer. Yeah. Going back to your example, just if you're not going to, you know, heed our advice and go with a password, manager. The two-factor authentication is massive. So even if somebody gets your password, and you get a notification that has to authorize them, you save yourself, a massive headache. You still have to deal with some stuff and go change your passwords and, do that. But at least now they haven't compromised your account. And, the other thing is, for coming up with a password, again, this is not a best practice, having the complex, essentially unmemorizable passwords is. But if that is not something you're going to do, then what I would suggest and have suggested to people is you come up with a sufficiently long password and then have derivatives of that for each account that you have. So you pick, some lyrics from a song, or, something sufficiently long enough, and then you have a standard, way of modifying that based on what you're logging into. So, you have some certain password, and then, appended at the end, or, at the beginning, is something for Microsoft or for Google or from whatever. Again, it's not ideal, especially if a person sees, multiple of your passwords. But what it does do is, if your password is published somewhere because of, you logged into a website that was not secure, at least now, if somebody takes your, email address or username and that password and throws it against a bunch of different websites, it's going to bounce back that it's not valid. So you save yourself there. So that's at least something, you can do in the absence of some of these other things that we've recommended.
Really good points. Anything that you could do to improve your security is better than nothing. And just to give you an example, for my kids, I use an application to have access to their health records. Somebody got the password. They don't know how they got the password to it, but I also had multi-factor authentication set up on it. So, and unfortunately, that one uses SMS. They don't have the option to set up with an application. So I was getting the text alert saying, "Here's your one-time password." So right away, that's going to set off all kinds of alarms in my head. I need to go change my password, whatever. The fact that if I didn't have that set up, I would have never known they got into the account, I don't know what they were up to, or they could have been just guessing. But because I had that set up, now I'm aware that somebody's trying to get into that account. The same thing, we talked about impersonation attacks. Somebody was trying to get into my business Instagram account just over the weekend. And the reason I know that is because I kept getting the password reset emails, but I also have multi-factor authentication set up on that. So I wasn't worried about it. They're not going to get in because that is through an app. And I already know they're not going to, they don't have my information. They didn't have the password either because they kept sending password reset emails. The point is, whether you believe someone is trying to hack you or not, they probably are. More than likely, somebody's trying to get your information, especially if you are more in your name's out there more. So if as attorneys, your name could be found pretty easily. As somebody who's very public about teaching people how to not get their stuff compromised, my name can be found pretty easily. So I'm a bigger target, but everybody's a target, and everybody 100% across the board, I could promise you are receiving phishing emails.
Yeah, no question on that. Everybody, who has an email address is a target. As an attorney, Scott's point is spot on. You're, in a lot of ways, you may be a larger target for several reasons. The first is, a lot of attorneys, whether you're engaged in litigation or transactional work, there's going to be somebody out there who doesn't like something you've done. you've either represented their, ex-spouse in a divorce, or represented maybe, a criminal who has wronged them or their family, or you've represented a bank that's foreclosing on their home and they think that you're the one taking their house. There's a lot of ways, that you can make an enemy doing everything, correct. And so, all it takes is, one of these people who either knows somebody or knows something themselves or has some spare time or resources, and they can attack you. And that's just one of a million reasons why they might choose an attorney. Maybe they're looking for, confidential information and, planning a ransomware attack, or, because they think that you've got a lot of money to pay them. There's a million reasons. But you absolutely have to treat yourself as being a target at all times.
Yeah, the ransomware attacks have come to a point where some of them will do ransomware as a service now. Meaning, if I want to hire a ransomware group to attack, XYZ law firm, they will agree to it, and they'll do if we're going to say request a $1 million ransom, they'll say we'll take 30%, you can keep 70%, and so that makes it a little more appealing to some people to go after you. But also, I've seen where a lawyer, a divorce attorney I know, was somebody that he sued, and I'm getting screwed this up as far as the law firm talk goes, but the person, not his client, but the person they were divorcing from, started impersonating him. So he created fake email accounts and started emailing clients, not clients, other lawyers that he knows. And fortunately, they caught on pretty quickly and sent me the information, so we were able to get the account shut down, the Google account. But it does happen, and it happens more than people will admit. So the other thing I can promise you is it's being underreported. So if we're being compromised, a lot of businesses are not reporting it, or they don't know they've been compromised. So just the best thing you could do is, like I said at the beginning, multi-factor authentication and complex passwords will prevent 99% of the issues. The other 1% is probably just education. So you can find everything Nuage Tech related, NWAJ Tech, all of the major social media platforms. You could go try to hack it if you want. No, I'm just kidding. But we're on all of them, so go follow us. And I am a big believer in education, so there'll be posts and stuff to educate as well. And that's all I have. I don't know if Chris has more.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
No, Scott, thank you. That was great. Thank you, guys. Sorry for the little snafu with the login this morning or this afternoon, but thank you guys for attending. And for anybody watching in the future, thank you. But Scott, thanks. That was great.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Scott.
You're welcome. So we do have October 5th as another Tech Tuesday. That one is ethics and tech. So make sure you come back. That's a panel. And then November, Mike, is it November 16th? Because I don't have it in front of me.
The 16th is what we had it for.
Yeah,
The
so
printers and
November
cybersecurity.
16th is printers and multi, the MFPs, the large printers you have, managed printers, and well, even regular printers in cybersecurity. They can be a very easy entry into your business if you're not careful. So make sure you check those out. And if there are no further questions or comments, you guys can go eat lunch.
I do not have any questions or comments, but Scott, do you want to stay on for a quick sec? I just
Sure.
and Eric apologized. He lost his internet and he just called me. His internet
Okay.
just came on just now.
Okay. Yeah, no. So we'll upload it so you can watch it over and over on
Perfect.
repeat. Stop recording.